My first instinct was to say no to the project because I was like, there's no way you can adapt this book. It's so poetic, it's so slight, it's not movie shaped at all, and I didn't want to try to stretch it and make it movie shaped. So I did a lot of hard thinking early on, and that was one of sort of the big ideas, like maybe there should be a larger story around the book so that the book could stay what it is and stay protected and safe at the heart. You know, make it the beating heart of a larger story that would be about the power of the book. So that larger story ends up becoming this crucial way to talk about the book, to bring out the themes of the book, and to underscore the ideas in the book that are, very, very poetic, very, very ephemeral, and, ethereal. Yeah.
And real quickly, the decision to go with such diverse styles for your animation.
That was also another sort of early big idea that was one of the reasons why it was like a deal breaker for me. I said, the producers asked me if I could make a big CG animated movie out of the book, and I said, I can get my head around using CG to do the larger story, but for the book itself, I really felt like stop motion was the only medium that would really be able to capture the poetry of the book properly. So it was one of those big ideas that I put on the table and said, I'll go down this road if we can do it this way. And it was almost a radical experimental idea to do that. But everybody was excited about it artistically and for what it would do story-wise.
Mackenzie, how was your experience of acting but only getting to use your voice?
Very difficult. I find animation is 10 times harder than live action because you have to do all of these emotions, all of these thoughts, but you can't use your body language or your face. So that's really tricky to try to get certain emotions and certain feelings into a handful of sentences.
And Mark, can you tell us how the book affected you at a personal level?
Sure. I didn't read it as a child. I actually encountered the book for the first time when I was about 20. And it came to me, my girlfriend at that time gave me her copy of the book because we were going to be separated. I was transferring to a school in California from New York, and I didn't want to be apart from her. I was really scared about this journey that I was maybe going to make, and she gave me the book and quoted the book and said, "It is only with the heart that one can see rightly what is essential and visible to the eye." And she would say, even if we're apart, we'll still be together. We're now married with 2 children, and if that doesn't tell you about the significance of the book in our lives, it's like it was really resonant. That those quotes are over the 20 years of my life that the book has sort of been in my life and affected me. Like that quote was the first thing that bubbled up when I said, how could I turn down the opportunity to try to figure out a way to pay tribute to this book and to pay tribute to that experience that I had. And that quote became sort of the cornerstone. It was sort of, we built everything around that quote. And it's crazy. I found a letter from back in the day when she was encouraging me to follow my dreams and to pursue animation, and she closed the letter with that quote. And it floored me when I found the letter, because I knew it was significant, but that was like, this is weird, this piece of evidence that is so concrete. And I know, I was like bawling. Yeah.
Well, Mackenzie, it's hard to top that story.
Sorry.
For you personally, what does this story mean to you? And especially since you have such a personal connection to the Little Prince now, it must mean even more to you.
Well, the book, before I knew about the film, meant a lot in the way that it taught you about imagination, about love and death and how to deal with it. And after it just makes me think of all the memories. When I read it, I think about all the silly voices you did when we were filming, all of the great times that I had. Because when we filmed this over the span of about 4 years. So I grew up filming this, and so I have a lot of incredible memories that happened while filming it as well as in my personal life.
And the tail end of that is, can you talk about the first time you saw it completed? How amazed were you at the final product? Because it's a very emotional experience.
The first time I saw it, it was exciting that I got to see the finished project, that it was finally there, but at the same time it was sad. Like I said, I worked on it for so many years. It was kind of sad to see that it was over, that we wouldn't have our sessions anymore.
Mark, how old are your children now, and what kind of reaction have they had to the film, or how did you use them in the film?
Okay, so my daughter is now 18. My daughter was the one who inspired the idea of a little girl character. You know, she sat on my lap and we watched Mulan over and over and over, you know, and all the Miyazaki films and as she was growing up. And so I really wanted to create a character kind of thinking about her to be the one that would read the story. And so she's an incredibly important part. And also, whenever Mackenzie wasn't around, she was recording the temp voices, my daughter. She's now going to college, and she's going to study illustration and animation, and she wants to make films, and so that's kind of crazy and amazing. My son is now just turned 15, and you know, he was 11 when we were doing all the temp voices, and so I basically put him in front of the mic and said, you know, made him be the little prince, and my wife was the mother, and I was the aviator, and you know, we were kind of just play acting the movie. But the incredible thing that happened, and I made sure we had a good mic just in case, you know, but he was 11 years old, he had just the right amount of like, he didn't care, you know, like there was no pressure, and it was kind of fun. And we kind of captured something, and when we cut it in, I think the amazing thing that happened is, even when we started adding in all the other, like we added in Mackenzie's voice, and we added in Jeff's voice, and we added in all, like Marion Cotillard's voice, it was like Riley's voice still worked. And so he's the voice of the Little Prince in the original version of the movie, and that's what's kind of crazy, all this, you know, that's another weird sort of deeply personal connection. I you know, even in the dubbed versions and all the other foreign territories where they dub all the actors, they dub the Little Prince, they leave Riley's laugh. So Riley's laugh stays in all the international versions, and the laugh of the Little Prince is so important that, I mean, that to me just melts my heart every time is to hear him in there, yeah.
You know, you mentioned Miyazaki, your film has the emotional breadth and the visual scope of a Miyazaki film, and the best of both worlds. How hard is that to actually accomplish? You were talking about the 4 years on working with this. This stuff is not, you don't create this overnight, right?
No. It takes so long. It takes so many artists, and so many artists like thinking the same way. And actually, we would talk about Miyazaki a lot. And Totoro, and in fact, was our tonal example because of the way he blends fantasy and reality. And the, you know, but we talked about Miyazaki a lot, not just because we're fans. The Little Prince is on record as Miyazaki's favorite book of all time, and so he was very much present with us. Like, we wanted to make sure that we weren't taking it lightly. We were treating the material very carefully, because ultimately, if Miyazaki were to see it, I would want, or someone is a fan of the book as Miyazaki is, I would want them to feel like this was made by people who love the book and people who are really trying to pay tribute to the power of the book. But yeah, it's like I did a lot of, what would Miyazaki do? And you know, the aviator's yard and his house and everything was very much inspired to sort of be like a Miyazaki environment, and we took a lot of inspiration from him.
Can you talk about, I understand you carried around a kit that sort of pitched the
Yeah,
movie.
it's called The Magic Suitcase.
Yeah. And secondly, your reaction when the decision was made not to release this in March.
The Magic Suitcase was actually this device that I was using to sort of help people understand just how deeply passionate we were about making this film. And it was like, it really was magic. I mean, it kind of created a way to talk about the film. And most times in the early days, I was approaching people, they're like this, and how on earth are you adapting this book? And by the end of the pitch, like, you know, sometimes people are in tears, and like, you know, it was a very, very effective pitch. In fact, the book that the little girl gives the aviator at the end in the hospital was a real physical prop that we built. It was handmade, that I would magically pull out of the case at the end of the pitch. And so it was very effective, especially with people like Jeff and Hans Zimmer. And honestly, that suitcase went all over the world because you need to understand, this is a very unconventional project. It's an independent project. It is not backed or based by a Disney or a Pixar or a DreamWorks. We were independently financed by many, many, many territories. You know, it was a kind of an incredible feat that we were able to put the budget together with so many sources. But that ultimately, to answer your other question, it gives us a very unconventional release pattern as well. Each territory needed to do their own thing based on what they needed to do. Most territories wanted to rush it into theaters, and some other territories weren't exactly sure what to do. So ultimately, we have an incredible partnership and an opportunity with Netflix. I am so thrilled that we're going to be bringing it to so many people. You know, you want people to see this film. Everybody that worked on this film loves it, believes in it, and just wants people to see it. So yeah, There's always bumps. There's always bumps in the road. We had our fair share of bumps throughout the entire production. I mean, to say that this film is a miracle is an understatement. It's like 19 miracles stopped on, on top of each other. It shouldn't exist. So I'm just really, really, really excited that it's now, Netflix is going to push it out to many, 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 many people that can finally get to see it. And I've been telling my friends for more than a year now who fly internationally, please don't watch it on an airplane. Like that's the only thing I don't want. You can watch it as a follow-up on an airplane, but don't see it the first time on an airplane. So yeah, I'm like, get the biggest TV you can find. And there will be some theatrical, which is really exciting, and I know that the diehards will go see it at the theater, which is great. And but no, I'm thrilled about moving forward.
Well, I'm homeschooled, so that makes it a lot easier. Sometimes when I'm working, especially with live action, I'll get behind in school during the week and I'll have to do it on the weekends. But for me, the balance is getting good grades. That's something that's very important to me. Also, having fun with it. Like, you can't do school and be like, oh, I have to do this. You have to have fun with it to get good grades and get your education. Because if you don't, then what's the point?
So favorite subjects or
Favorite
things to
subjects.
study?
I love history and French and literature. But I also really like astronomy. I don't take it anymore. It was in my past school, but I really liked that.
You're no stranger to being part of a film that is part of a larger pop culture sensation. And this would be more of a classic, if you will. So I'm wondering what the reaction was among your peers and even with press and fans when you tell people that you're involved in this project.
Well, when I say that I'm a part of The Little Prince, most people think that I am The Little Prince, which is kind of funny. But when I explain to them what the film is about, they're interested in it. The book means so much to so many different people, and it means many different things. And I think that the film really captures that feeling. And when you try to explain that to someone, it's difficult at times, but you just have to tell them you have to go see it. You have to go see it in theaters because it's breathtaking. So it's something very unique.
You've got like an army of fans. It's crazy. You've got an amazing network of fans. Yeah, it's really been kind of crazy and great.
Well, having that built-in audience, has it been like a blessing in the sense of like, it opens doors and opportunities, or has it been a curse in a way with like fans expecting like a certain type of genre, a certain type of thing?
I'm very lucky, and I have really, really incredible fans that support me in what I do. So yeah, they're wonderful. They'll go see my movies. They'll support me. But I've never ever come across like an angry fan or something like that. They've always been incredibly supportive.
Can you talk a little bit about, you made a decision with the Prince story. Let's talk about this specifically now. There were some things left out, because of planets and so forth. Was it ever a concern of yours that maybe the purists would go, "You left out"?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, any adaptation is always, you're always going to run into some, hey, you didn't do this right, you didn't do that right. And so that was actually one of the things that I kind of figured out early on. It's like, there's actually no way to do this and please everybody, right? And that actually kind of gave me the freedom to sort of explore it in the way that I felt artistically would be the right way to go about it. I always knew that finding the balance between the larger story and the book was going to be a big challenge. It was something I worked with my editors for a long, we spent countless hours and days and working over the course of years to get that balance as best we could. There were times where we had more material from the book, and it didn't necessarily work until we started to strip away anything that wasn't emotionally deeply relevant to the little girl as a character. And so once we were defining, and of course with the help of Mackenzie helping define that character, and like once we started to figure out who that kid was and it really started to help us shape what material from the book resonated with her. And so over time, I tried to include a little clue to almost everything in the book. Like the lamplighter's not in it, but you see a drawing of the lamplighter,
Right.
And I wanted people to feel like, well, the aviator's telling her the whole story, but these are the bits that are relevant and that resonate with her. Because that's, I think, how the book works in people's lives. They gravitate towards the material that's meaningful, And then that's the cool thing that happens when you talk with your friends who know the book, is like you'll talk about the different things that meant something to you, you know.
Tell us about the cast. I mean, you got 3 Oscar winners here. Can you sort of go to anything that happened while in the studio recording?
You know what? I am so crazy lucky with the cast. I mean, primarily, what's incredible is, like, so she was 12 when we started doing this, and she carries the movie. Like, it's crazy. Like, when we counted out the number of lines for everybody, it's crazy how much work she put in to make this, okay? So that already, and that's why it was really hard to figure out how to put all the pieces together. But when we got, like, Jeff Bridges, we got Rachel McAdams, Ricky Gervais, and, like, Albert Brooks, Paul Rudd, like, every single name is like, oh my God, like, and I'm like, was incredibly thrilled to be working. And I had an incredible experience working with every single person, even Marion Cotillard, who was the last person we recorded. She did the Rose for both French and English. Everybody was so generous and amazing to work with and had a deep affection for the material. Like even James Franco, who did the Fox, like I was just like, it was my casting director, Sarah Finn, came up with the idea, and she was like, James Franco for the Fox. I'm like, that's genius. Like it's the perfect combination of like, of wisdom and smarts and irreverence but he came in, we recorded for probably less than 2 hours, and that stuff is hard to say. It's such poetry, and he's just such an amazingly smart guy and so very literate, and he took it incredibly seriously. And that's what I think, that's probably the thing that resonates with me most, is like all the actors took it very seriously. I asked them to treat it like a real role, not to think of it as a cartoon for kids or whatever, but just to think of it as a real role. And but yeah, I think the coolest thing that happened was when we recorded with Jeff and Mackenzie at Jeff's house. Jeff invited us into his recording studio in his house, and he's like in his socks and like, having his tea, and he was just, it just created an environment that was really warm and generous, and just, he's a lovely, lovely human being. And but like, here we were playing together and exploring, and he wrote on a piece of paper, he folded it into a paper airplane, and he threw it over to Mackenzie, and that, like, it was just like, I don't know,
it's one of those moments where you're just like, wow,
yeah,
this is happening.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
Just very quickly, you talked about the 19 miracles for this project.
Yeah.
What kind of emotion did you go through the first time you saw it with, I'm assuming, a packed house?
Yeah, well, that was the Cannes Film Festival premiere. I know, and it's like, we're all in tuxedos, like how much more surreal can life get, and we're exhausted, and we're on the red carpet. I mean, all I can say is like, I'm holding on to Riley, my son, who's wearing a bow tie that he tied and his tuxedo, and he's like the star, and there's Mackenzie in this amazing gown, and Marion Cotillard, standing next to us. Like, it was like, this is crazy what's happening. And then to watch the movie, honestly, I sat there mortified. I wanted to run. I wanted to find an exit. Like, I'm looking, all I can see are the mistakes. I was way too close to it. All I'm seeing is like, and it's just, and it was subtitled in French, and so it's like, it was crazy. So the thing that saved it for me, 2 things saved it for me. Marion Cotillard sitting right here. I guess you were.
I was
near.
I was down. I think I was like 4 people over.
So Marion Cotillard sitting right here. My son is on the other side of her, like surreal. And I keep hearing her sniffling, and I keep like about 15 minutes in the movie she's sniffling, and I just keep hearing her sniffling, and I'm like, oh, she needs a tissue, like, oh, she has a cold. And then I start going, I don't know, it's kind of emotional. Sounds like there's some emotional stuff going on over there. And I'll never forget, like, I was like, I didn't want to look at her because I was like, she just kept sniffling. Finally, sort of 20 minutes towards the end of the movie, like, things get kind of really heavy-duty emotional in the movie. She's sniffling a lot. I remember, I'll never forget, I turned to her and I looked at her. And she turned to me and she just went, and she had tears down her face, and she looked at me like, we just had this moment, and I was just like, oh, God. And I was like, I guess it's working. And then when the movie ended and the lights came up, the applause was just so warm and generous, and it seemed to be endless in the dark. They turned the lights on, people stood up. The standing ovation just kind of went on and on and on. And all these grown-ups in tuxedos with red watery eyes were like looking at me, and it was just the weirdest, like, after the experience that I had, and then to have that sort of validation. And honestly, the capper was to have members of the Saint-Exupéry family come up to me and just hug me and say, I've lived with this story my whole life. I've lived and breathed this story, and you've made it new again. You know, that was crazy, and that was amazing. And then we got invited to dinner with the Saint-Exupéry family, invited us to a dinner, and it was like, to get a standing ovation from the Saint-Exupéry family after going through years of hardship of trying to figure out how best to honor this tremendous work, this tremendous piece of art, was like, yeah. I started to make a speech, and I had to sit down because I was like, this is not going to work.
A little detail question. Is that why you chose to keep the artwork of the story in French?
Yes. Okay, so very good. So the pages are actually, we hired a forger to recreate Saint-Exupéry's handwriting. I saw the original manuscript pages. They're all handwritten, they're very scribbly, and they were just so clearly a work of art that I wanted those in the movie to be a connection to the original pages. And also it was a way to honor the French origin, was to allow that to be in French. And his handwriting is so hard to read that I honestly thought that most people would look at it and just go, oh, it's messy handwriting. And they wouldn't actually take the time to figure out what language it was. I think, and I also wanted the French audiences to look at it and feel like, yes, this is the way I read the book. This is the connection I have with the book. And that was really important. And you know, all the other signage in the movie, we changed it for each territory, but we kept the pages the same as a tribute back to those original amazing works of Saint-Exupéry that I got to see. They were in a vault at the Morgan Library in New York City, and they pulled them out with like white gloves, and I was just in awe. They were so fragile and delicate, and clearly the work of an artist working something out. And yeah, so that's the link. And yeah, it's one of those things that it was sort of like, is this going to work? You know, are people going to get disrupted by this? And you know, yeah, it's one of those things, like there was no perfect way to do it, and we seriously couldn't afford to just remake those pages. But I think it would have hurt it, you know, in some way if we didn't. But yeah, the fact that we hired a forger, I think makes it cool.
Thank you, guys.